As the frantic search for them wound its way through every nook and corner of Mughled town, Michael and Christina enjoyed a fitfully peaceful trip. Women had offered their bodies to be tortured, raped, and brutally killed, while men had endured torturing and flogging to purchase their flight. The couple, however, were blissfully unaware that their relative safety was bought and paid for with a heavy price. Under advisement from Dr. Kukotia, the couple risked overland travel by way of local transportation from Mughled to the borders of the Democratic Republic of South Sudan. As their benevolent, late sister Catherine had advised, the couple disembarked from the bus at a small village near the outskirts of Abyei city. The late sister Patricia had explained that the city was completely deserted, much like the Syrian city of Kobani, where the ISIS terrorists and the Kurdish Peshmerga fighters battled each other from street to street and from lane to lane. More than 300,000 Kurdish fled their city, leaving it to the demons of ISIS terrorists. Likewise, in the Abyei, the southern troops and the northern Mujahideen were battling each other like hungry dogs fighting over a bone. So, the couple decided to avoid it completely. Michael and Christina were told that the moment they stood on South Sudanese soil, they would be safe. They were promised that the land they were fleeing to was a secular country with all the freedoms and securities of Western countries. The people of that land, as they claimed, had put religious differences behind them and embraced secularism. It was a land that separated state from religion, gave women equal rights, and recognized all people as equal regardless of race, color, gender, religion, ethnicity, etc. First of all, what do people mean by the term secular country? Simply put, they mean the people of that country don't want God to rule their lives nor follow laws drawn from the Bible, preferring otherwise to follow man-made systems such as democracy, human rights, sexual freedom, living together without marriage, gay marriage, right to abortion. Children are to be raised by the government and not the parents. Children will not take care of their parents when they grow old, but to be sent to a home care so that someone else will take care of them. No need to go to church or believe in God anymore, no religion to be taught at school, etc., etc., etc. Many of the churches in Europe are deserted, only to be sold in auctions to be bought by Muslims who convert them into mosques. Roman Catholic churches, Eastern Orthodox churches, Egyptian Coptic churches, Syrian churches, all of which went into Mariology and exalted Mary and made her co-redemptive with Christ. Today, most of the Protestant churches that established during and after the Reformation are as good as dead, the Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, Anglican and Baptist churches included. After the so-called Enlightenment, Europe forsook God and invented every kind of worldly man-made isms, secularism, Darwinism, also called evolution, communism, atheism, nihilism, Nazism, liberalism, Freudianism, deism, humanism, existentialism, postmodernism, feminism, pantheism, etc. We are blessed that Americans still echo the cry, "In God we trust." America remains 200 years behind the atheism of Europe and continues to believe in God. It had 3 great awakenings or revivals. In any case, Christina was still very weak and her body had not yet fully recovered. Michael was not keen on moving his ailing wife from the relative safety and loving care of the loving Catholic nuns, but their presence posing an imminent danger to the two sisters, he agreed to take the risk and move on. As soon as Christina completed her course of medication and was declared fit enough to travel, the couple left the charity home and began their exodus to freedom. They left late afternoon on the same day Satan's troops haunted the peaceful town, turning it upside down, in much the same way as their ISIS counterparts, who similarly invade Christian towns in Syria to capture its inhabitants, staying until they had quenched their killing spree. When they beheaded 21 innocent Coptic Christians on a beach in Libya and posted their barbaric slaughter on the internet for the whole world to see, they announced that it was to avenge the blood of Osama bin Laden, who was killed by the Crusaders. When the evil Londoner, Jihadi John, who beheaded many innocent Westerners, was now known by his true identity as Muhammad Imazi, his former neighbors, friends, classmates, colleagues, and boss praised his moral behavior as an angel in human form and almost nominated him for the coming Nobel Peace Prize. They made him out as an innocent lamb brainwashed by ISIS and turned from a good British citizen into a jihadi monster. No one was ready to speak the truth and say he was the product of his religious upbringing and hence he was a true Muslim who sincerely followed the teachings of his Quran and Sunnah of his Prophet. The 3 British teenager girls who fled from London and travelled through Turkey to Syria and joined the newly founded Islamic Caliphate were also considered to be victims of ISIS propaganda and not true followers of Islam. In retrospect, ISIS beheads its victims. Prophet Muhammad beheaded his victims, 900 Jews, in one single day. ISIS burns their victims, and Muhammad killed his victims in even more cruel ways when he cut their hands and legs off and pierced their eyes with burning nails, leaving them to die slowly on the hot sands. All the so-called 4 rightly guided caliphs of Islam burnt their righteousness through a swath of war prisoners and gays. At least, so far ISIS has not burnt gays. In recent videos posted on the internet, ISIS religious judges tossed 5 gays down from the highest buildings in town. When their bodies hit the ground, an angry mob of thousands of men, women, and children stoned them to death, since some were still alive, and in other cases, just to make sure they stayed dead. As usual, the Muslim apologist will tell you that this is most Islamism. They forget that in a hadith, the Prophet Muhammad commanded that a gay is to be thrown to his death from the highest place. When the 2 French brothers stormed the Charlie Hebdo magazine office and murdered the cartoonists who criticized the Prophet Muhammad, many Muslims condemned them and considered their action as an un-Islamic. They forgot to refer to the cruel murder of the woman Asma bint Marwan who wrote a few verses of poetry and criticized Muhammad for murdering his own relatives after they surrendered in the Battle of Badr. Every Muslim terrorist is innocent until proven guilty through his terrorist action. I have received many life threats from a Muslim terrorist who lives a couple of blocks away from me. When I reported him to the RCMP, I was told that internet recordings cannot be accepted as evidence in a court of law. I then told to call 911 if I see him standing near my apartment or if he tries to attack me while I am in my car or in public. Even then, I was advised of the need for credible witnesses. In other words, unless he kills me, I have no legal ground to sue him. He is an innocent lamb like Jihadi John and until proven to be guilty by killing me or boarding a plane bound for Turkey to join ISIS. If the American couple, Michael and Christina, had delayed their trip by an hour, they would have been dead and gone. The son of the devil, Khalid Mansour, would not have hesitated for a second to shoot them and shoot those nuns who gave them shelter for 7 days. Although they had managed to escape their clutches, the couple could hardly know the amount of devastation and human causalities that they left behind them. If they had foreseen what had befallen those who helped them to escape, they would have remained behind and offered their lives for the sake of saving the lives of those innocent people. Once again, Michael and Christina used the cover of night, left the small village at dusk time and resumed their risky journey, on foot. The village was located exactly on the borderline between the 2 countries. They began their walk immediately after the sunset and depended for some time on the twilight to find their way. As soon as dusk faded away, they found themselves cloaked in the pitch-black darkness of the African night. Many people believe that Africa is called the Black Continent because of its black inhabitants. That is totally wrong. A visitor to that old continent would soon discard that erroneous belief when he experiences his first moonless night. Even the earth of that continent is black. So, in my humble opinion, only God knows why everything in Africa is black and dark, and that including the minds of the majority of its people. Among all the 7 billion of humans in the world, Africans are the most superstitious, backward, and deeply involved in black magic and animism. Africa has the highest illiteracy rate in the world. Epidemic diseases kill every year thousands of Africans. Ebola claimed the lives of thousands and spreading like fire throughout the whole continent. Oh my God, have mercy on Africa. Some people in the past used the Bible to connect Africans with slavery or relate them to the devil. Some silly preachers even preached that the black people are the children of the devil. The Bible has never said the devil is black. He is called the power of darkness, Colossians 1:13-14, which means spiritual darkness. On the contrary, Satan transforms himself as an angel of light, 2 Corinthians 11:14. Wherefore, he is the most beautiful being that has been created by God, Ezekiel 28:12-15. He has not been described as ugly or black in color. If he can transform himself as an angel of light, then the black Africans will be the last people to resemble him in color or look. Besides that, Satan is spirit and not physical embodiment. Under the influences of anti-Semitism and the teachings of Friedrich Nietzsche, supermind, God is dead, and nihilism, Adolf Hitler believed that the Jews and the black people did not deserve to live and attempted to annihilate them. He decided first to destroy the Jews of Europe and then march to the black continent to decimate the Africans. When Hitler heard that a black man was appointed as the first medical doctor in America, he is reported to have wondered how a virus can treat another virus. For him, the black man was just a virus that needed to be destroyed. Some Europeans, influenced by the theory of evolution which taught that nature was trying to get rid of the weak and the sick, and coined some phrases such as natural selection and survival for the fittest. They said that, let the weak and sick and poor die. The moral virtues of kindness and mercy were discarded and replaced by the so-called greatest virtue of terror, and the result was the death of 75 million people during the World War I and World War II and the horrific Nazi Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were gassed and killed. Mark Twain became atheist because he heard slavery being preached from the pulpit. Many Christians used the curse of Noah to his grandson Canaan, in Genesis 9:25, and justified the slavery of the black Africans because they are the descendants of Ham. See the Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10. First of all, Noah cursed his grandson Canaan and not his son Ham. Africans are Hamites through the other sons of Ham, Cush, Put, and Mizraim, Genesis 10:6. The descendants of Canaan were the 7 tribes which known as the Canaanites who used to live in present-day Israel. There are many more Hamites besides the Africans. For example, the Hamitic peoples included the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Mongols, the Koreans, the Native Americans, etc. Secondly, the Bible states that the Israelis were used by God to punish the Canaanites for their abominable practices which led the land to vomit them out, Leviticus 18:30, Deuteronomy 18:9-11. God destroyed 7 Canaanite nations and gave their land to the children of Israel as an everlasting inheritance, present-day Israel, Acts 13:19. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. It was given to them by God, established by God, held in trust for them by God when they were driven from it, restored to them by God, and destined by God to be their homeland forever. Before we drop the matter of Africa, there is something worth mentioning. Some African Americans claim to be the true Israelis, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but somehow their identity as true Hebrew Israelis was stolen from them by today Jews who live in Israel. This conspiracy theory might sound crazy to any serious student of history or biblical scholar. Many African Americans, including professors and highly educated students, take it seriously and publish their theories on the internet and whatever available media. According to them, the present Jews are the descendants of the inhabitants of the Khazar Empire, which flourished during the 8th century. In year 740 AD, their king Bulan decided to adopt one of the 3 known religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. According to a legend mentioned in a fictional book called Dictionary of the Khazars, by the Serbian writer, Milorad Pavic, the king of the Khazars invited the scholars of those 3 religions and asked them to debate in front of him, and he promised to follow the religion of the winner. In that way the king, Bulan, picked up Judaism and converted his entire subjects to the religion of his choice. Pavic stated that in his novel Hazars symbolically represent Serbs. This legend is mentioned in that book as a mockery to the author's own people, the Serbs, but the entire accounts of course are meant as an anti-Semitic propaganda against the Jews. Many Muslim religious scholars preach that legend from the pulpits at their mosques and teach it in their schools and colleges as if it is an historical fact. African Americans popularized and pushed further afield than Muslims. Some African Americans added few things to it. They claim that those converted Hazars were run out of their empire when the Mongols at the leadership of Genghis Khan invaded it and forced them to flee to Europe. In Europe they became Jews and Gypsies. They were heavily persecuted by the European Christians, which reached its ugliest form at the Nazi Holocaust. After the Second World War they immigrated to the homeland of the Jews and settled in Palestine, today Israel. Of course, this theory contradicts the well-documented history of the Jews in diaspora, which recorded in all the annals of the kings and rulers of Western European kingdoms, including the records of the popes of the Roman Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, Coptic Church, Syrian Church, Russian Eastern Church, Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and the annals of all emperors of the Byzantine Empire, which lasted from 320 AD until 1453 AD. No other group of people have their histories so well documented. Even the New Testament mentions the presence of the Jews all over the Roman Empire. Mark Twain once said, "All things are mortal except the Jew." Frederick the Great of Russia asked his court chaplain to prove the inerrancy of the Bible. He said one word, "Sir, Israel." This conspiracy theory has many holes and built on layers of false assumptions and speculation. The first question revolves around how the Hamitic black Africans mysteriously became the Semitic Hebrew Jews. The adherents of this theory would invariably claim that the ancient Israelis were black. Due to the heavy persecution they faced from other nations, they fled to Africa and hid themselves there until the Muslims invaded them and took them as war captives. Then, they sold them as slaves to the European settlers who took them to the New World. After centuries of enslavement, their descendants were told by their masters that they were Africans and hence made to believe that their original homeland was Africa. This lie was believed by the whole world until recently. Through archaeology, some of them have come to know that they were the chosen people and the Jews of Israel had stolen their identity. If you tell them that the Jews and Arabs are cousins through Ishmael and Isaac, the sons of Abraham, and today the Arabs of the Middle East look like the Jews rather than the black African Americans, they will tell you that the Arabs of the Middle East also are fake people who had stolen someone's identity. They were, instead, from Persia, Iran, who originally emigrated from the European region which today called Georgia. According to them, even the Egyptians today are not the true Kemites, ancient Egyptians. Likewise, they were Asian invaders who conquered Egypt and forced the ancient Egyptians to flee to Sudan and live there. The first African American to invent this fabricated theory was a false Muslim prophet called Elijah Muhammad. He claimed that his God Allah has revealed to him that the Jews who are living in Palestine today are not the true Hebrew Israelis whom Moses had brought out of Egypt and had led to the Promised Land, the land of Canaan, Israel today. According to his prophecy, the true Hebrew Israelis are the black African people who were brought as slaves during the transatlantic slavery trade, 16th to 19th centuries, the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. This prophecy was made public and popularized by Louis Farrakhan. Elijah Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan were responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X, also known as El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. Malcolm X was assassinated when he broke up with the Nation of Islam and exposed its spiritual leader, Elijah Muhammad, as a hypocrite who fathered 8 children out of wedlock with 6 of his teenage secretaries. Under the instigation of that false prophet Elijah Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan delivered a condemning message in which he declared Malcolm X as a traitor and an apostate who deserved to be killed. Shortly after that, 3 assassins from the Nation of Islam stormed the crowded hall where Malcolm X was delivering a speech before a huge crowd and shot 15 bullets at point-blank range at him on the 21st of February, 1965. I felt it expedient to include this information here. The false prophecy began with the Muslims and soon adopted by the majority of the other African Americans, including the Christians. Many former African American Christians claimed that the Lord has revealed that truth to them through divine inspiration and Holy Spirit's illumination. Every African American Christian accepts that conspiracy theory forsakes Christianity and adopts that Black Hebrew Israelis cult. They can quote to you hundreds of Old Testament and New Testament's verses to prove their claim. They also quote freely from all the apocryphal books. They even employ some pseudo-apocryphal books such as the Book of Jasher and Book of Enoch. When the theorists developed critical mass, it developed into a huge conspiracy theory. Some had even allotted each black group to its corresponding Israelite tribe component. The school of thought attributes the Negroes, African Americans, of the USA to the tribe of Judah, the Puerto Ricans to the Ephraim, the Cubans to the Manasseh, the West Indians, Jamaica to Belize as descendants of tribe of Benjamin, the Mexicans to the Issachar, the Haitians to the priestly tribe of Levi, the Hawaiians, Samoans to the Naphtali, Seminole Indians and Australian Aborigines to the Reuben, Panamanians and Colombians to the Zebulun, Brazilians and Argentinians to the Asher, Dominicans to the Simeon, and North American Indians to the tribe of Gad. No one would fail to notice that some of those 12 tribes, such as the Native Americans, Australian Aborigines, and the Mexicans, were not originally descendants of the African slaves who were brought to the New World through the transatlantic slave trade from 16th century to 19th century. Neither the so-called prophecy of Elijah Muhammad of the Nation of Islam nor the supposedly received through divine inspiration or illumination by some of the so-called Black Hebrew Israelis of America could solve this riddle. The only common factor between the Africans and the Native Americans were both subjected to an evil and harsh slavery system by the European settlers. After over 1 million Mexicans were enslaved and killed, the Spanish conquistadors and colonists, under the advice of the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas, replaced the natives with African slaves. Bartolomé de las Casas tried to save the natives and relieve them from the evil institution of slavery. He suggested that instead of enslaving the Mexicans, Spain induct African slaves. He believed that the enslavement of the Africans was morally and religiously justifiable because they were captured in just wars between the tribes. Based on this satanic idea, African slaves were either bought from their Arab masters or captured from their villages and shipped to the New World in hundreds, thousands, until their numbers reached millions. Many people think that the majority of the African slaves were brought to the United States of America. That is totally wrong. 95% were brought to other European colonies in the two Americas and their islands. Only 5% ended in the USA. We are told that Bartolomé de las Casas later on regretted his decision to switch to Africa when he saw the evil way African slaves were treated and killed too. But, he understood that it was too late to undo the evil he had created. The settlers discovered that the natives were weak and lazy while the Africans were strong and worked harder. In order to solve the mystery of including the Native Americans in that chart, we need to go beyond the two false prophecies and uncover the first true conspirator who invented that strange chart of the so-called newly discovered 12 lost tribes of Israel. Surprisingly, the chart owes its origin to a white author. He was one of the so-called white devils, the white Europeans, who stole the Africans from their continent and brought them as slaves to the Americas. He was known as Ludwig B. Larson. He included it in his work, The Little Book, Key to the Bible and Heavens. The Mystery of the Ages Revealed, which was first published in 1939. He described the locations of those 12 tribes on pages 170 to 179. He depended on astrology and also heavily borrowed from the Book of the Mormons by Joseph Smith. The Mormons believe that black Africans have no souls and hence cannot be saved. Ludwig B. Larson was believed to be a 33rd-degree Freemason Illuminati and based his writings on the New World Order. We will not go into the conspiracy theory of the secret societies of the Freemasonry and Illuminati. Suffice to say, Ludwig B. Larson wasn't a biblical scholar or notable historian or writer. No one can ignore the great sufferings and the inexcusable abuses that Africans suffered in the hands of slavers in the New World. I strongly condemn such inhumane treatment of human beings by their fellow man. But an evil done in the past cannot be undone by creating a false theory to justify the victim's misfortune or lot in life. Not all descendants of the former African slaves agree with this conspiracy theory. But, all of them look at Africa as a lowly place whose inhabitants have no share in any ancient civilizations or made any notable contributions in the past. They argue that Africans have no religion or heritage. It is very understandable that they disassociate themselves from a heritage of ignominy. Some of them, such as the Jamaicans, invented a different theory to avoid being labeled as the descendants of backward Africans. For that reason, the Jamaicans created a religious cult called Rastafarianism, which upholds their claim of being descendants of the Ethiopian kingdom of Aksum, making the former Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie their deity and worshipping him as the Almighty God who was the real incarnation of God the Father. The late reggae superstar, Bob Marley, popularized that cult through his lovely music and songs. Interviewer: can you tell the people what it means being a Rastafarian? Bob Marley: I would say to the people, be still, and know that His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia is the Almighty. Now, the Bible say so, Babylon newspaper say so, and I and the children say so. You know. So I don't see how much more reveal our people want. What they want, a white God, well, God come black. True. Yet, a third group which doesn't have many followers are African Americans who claim to be direct descendants of the ancient Egyptians who were known as the ancient Kemites. They believed that their Egyptian ancestors were the pharaohs who built the pyramids. They refused to attach themselves to the followers of Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. They are like the ancient Kemites who were polytheists and animists. They worship nature, spirits, and all gods of Egypt. They also claim that Egyptians in this day and age are simply Arabs and have nothing to do with their ancient ancestors. Their ancestors were invaded and conquered by the Arab Muslims who drove them out of their country and occupied it. At present, their Kemitic ancestors live in Sudan. Some of their number claim that God is a black woman. Alex Haley, in his masterpiece, Roots 1976, went to Africa and in search of his roots. He spent years tracing his own family history and decided it went back to a single African man, Kunta Kinte, who was captured in Gambia and taken to America as a slave around 1767. In one village, he heard the native Africans spoke about Kunta Kinte, who went to bring wood and was captured and taken away as a slave by some foreigners. So, in that way, Alex Haley discovered his roots and divined the truth about the origins of his great-great African ancestor. He did not try to go beyond that and forge a pseudo-heritage of pride and significance. If we ignore all the obvious facts and for the sake of argument let us assume that African Americans are the true Hebrew Israelis. Where is their Torah and what happened to the other books of the Old Testament? At the time of Jesus, the Jews were very committed to their religious beliefs and advocated the utmost care of their holy scripture. They were civilized and had spoken and written Hebrew. 1/3 of the population of Alexandria were Jews. 200 years before the first coming of Christ, the Jews of Alexandria had translated the entire Old Testament into Greek, the Septuagint. The greatest philosopher at that time was a Jew by the name of Philo. If we look at Africa before the Arab Muslims' invasion and enslavement in the 7th century AD, we find nothing worth mentioning. No written history of any civilized group. No notable heritage or unifying religion. They were deeply involved in black magic and worship of evil spirits. Most of them were animists and worshipped the spirits of their ancestors. The continent itself was a nameless mass of huge land until Leo Africanus, 1488–1554, lent it his last name in the 16th AD. Today Arab Tunisians reject this theory and claim that their ancient ancestors, the Berber tribes, known as the Carthaginians who dwelt in North Africa, to be the first people to refer to the black inhabitants of the rest of Africa as Ifrans, which means cave dwellers. Many people today believe that the North Africa's inhabitants who have fairer and lighter skins such as the Egyptians, Libyans, Tunisians, Algerians, and Moroccans are Arabs and not Africans. They distinguish them from other Africans as if the two races are living in two different continents. Some people go further than that to submit that North Africa is part of Arabia or Europe. If you say to an Egyptian, Libyan, Tunisian, Algerian, or Moroccan that you are an African, he will consider it as an insult. He will respond angrily and say to you, I am an Arab. Even pure black Africans like the Mauritanians and northern Sudanese claim to be Arabs and hate to be described as Africans. When the Africans were invaded and enslaved by the Arab Muslims and other Europeans, they were very backward and engaged in constant warfare between the many tribes. To this day, some go around naked and dwell in primitive habitats. Very few of them were able to form a nation or a kingdom. The most notable were the Aksum Kingdom in Ethiopia and the kingdoms of Egypt. Most of the African tribes don't have a written history. This sad fact is the reason that led many African Americans to deny and despise their African origin and create alternate theories which lend them credence. They placed themselves as the chosen Hebrew Israelis and considered the true Jews as identity thieves. The dangerous part of this theory is the claim that Christ did not die for the sins of the whole world. He died for their sins alone. He did not come to save anyone else except them, and when he will return he will save them again from other nations which have enslaved and ill-treated them. He will make them kings and priests to rule all other nations. Some have left Christianity and came up with a new cult that called IUIC, Israel United in Christ. They accept the Old and New Testaments. They revive all the apocryphal books. But their interpretation of the Bible justifies the false doctrine of their new cult. Some of them harbor indescribable hatred towards the Jews of Israel and call them serpent people and Satan worshippers. They are highly racial and anti-Semitic. They also hate the white man and consider him to be the source of all their past and present ills and miseries. Many of them believe that there is an undergoing secret plot to destroy them through poisoning their environment, sterilization, and killing them through the American police. They also believe that for many years the government of America secretly applying various eugenic tactics to get rid of the black race. It should be no surprise that they also hate Christians, their churches, and pastors. For them, Christianity is a false religion created by the white people after stealing away the Bible of the black Hebrew Israelis. According to them, the Christian churches kept African Americans, for centuries, numb and dumb and blind about their great religious heritage. The Christian churches were responsible for them believing that the Jews are the true Hebrew Israelis, and for this reason they are required to bless them and help the Jew establish himself in their promised land. By so doing, they would ensure the return of the Messiah. Nevertheless, the moment God opened their eyes to the truth, they came to know that they are the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are the true people of the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 12, 1-3, for whom Christ died on the cross and to whom he shall come back again to crown them kings and make all other nations of the world their servants and maidservants. We leave their strange claim here and we shall pick it up later on. Michael and Christina continued to walk in the dark for some time. Though they were walking under the open sky, still they felt as if they were going through a dark and long tunnel, with neither a beginning or an end. Several times, due to her weakened state, Christina's feet numbed to the point they could not hold her anymore. Michael had to piggyback her. With the weight of his wife on his back and greatly reduced vision, he stumbled twice. Once his foot went into a hole and once he stepped on a small rock. In both times, he managed to recover his balance and avoid a fall. The couple's progress became difficult and was peppered with frequent stops to rest. Michael's strong faith in God became the anchor to take them through the dark and frightening night. He kept on singing encouraging hymns, psalms, and claiming promises of the Bible. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, Psalm 23, 4. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, Psalm 91, 5. The wilderness that the couple were walking in was known as the poor savanna, where the trees were less in number and shorter in height, amidst sand and empty land. Poisonous snakes and scorpions abounded. They simply placed their fate in God's hands and ventured into the unknown. There were a few miles remaining to the border of South Sudan. They decided to walk throughout the night, taking rest and a little sleep only during the day.